Hey guys, welcome back to The Joy of Wrenching. My name is Les, I'm your friendly neighborhood mechanic. And today in the shop I've got this gorgeous 2017 Toyota Prius, and it's got a roaring sound coming from the rear end of the vehicle. So if you know, you know, normally that is a wheel bearing going bad. So I want to show you how to diagnose bad wheel bearings on a car like this. Doesn't have to be a Prius necessarily, lots of different cars. So I want to show you how to diagnose the problem, and then if that is the problem, I'm going to show you how to replace it on one of these 2017 or newer Toyota Priuses. So come along and let's get into it. So this Prius has 162,000 miles on it, really well maintained. And like I said, they don't tend to have a ton of problems with them. But one of the things that this customer is complaining about is a roaring sound coming from the rear end. So I've got myself mic'd up, and I've got a mic sitting in the back, very back seat area of this car. And we're going to go for a ride. And I want to see if that'll get picked up on the audio here. Now, with wheel bearings, normally you won't hear the noise until you get, 30, 40 mile an hour. I don't know if this is going to pick it up, but I can hear it even at this low of a speed of 25 or so. Let's go just a little faster. There, it's really, really prominent there, about 35 mile an hour. Now, one thing you can do to see if it's wheel bearings is while you're driving along, go side to side and see if that noise changes. If it goes louder, softer, then that's a dead giveaway that you got a wheel bearing. But if both wheel bearings are bad, or if the rear axle or something like that is a problem, then that noise will stay pretty consistent. I'm hearing a little bit of a difference here as I swerve side to side, and so that's leading me towards the wheel bearing. But that's not a definitive answer. What we need to do next is we need to put this thing up in the air, and we need to verify if there's a wheel bearing gone bad or not. But let's get out here and go a little faster. 40, 45. Oh yeah, I can definitely hear that. I don't know if it's picking it up in the audio, but it changes going side to side. And, be careful with this, do it on a closed road like I'm on here, so that nobody thinks that you've just had a little too much to drink or something like that. And we're going to put this thing in the air next, and we will see just what we've got going on with the wheel bearing. Another thing that I forgot to mention is if it's a wheel bearing, it'll typically get louder the faster you go, as this one is. And again, I hope it's being picked up. Let me do a little swerve test for you. Quieter, louder, quieter, louder. So definitely leaning towards a wheel bearing. The thing that you will get fooled by is you might think, oh, I heard it get louder when I went to the left, or I loaded up the left side of the vehicle. And you might say, oh, that means the left side of the vehicle is the one that's got the bad wheel bearing. Well, that's not always the case. Sometimes the right one will make more noise when you unload it than it will when it's loaded. So just because you hear it when you load one side of the vehicle or the other doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be that wheel bearing. But we'll take it apart and we'll find out for sure. So we took the car out on the road, and I tried to show you and tried to pick up the audio with the extra mic in the back there of that roaring sound that got louder as we sped up, and then also changed as we swerved left to right. And that's a telltale sign that there's a wheel bearing going bad. But it doesn't tell you which one of these wheel bearings in the back. I could hear it in the back. I knew it was at least in the back. But it doesn't tell you which side that has the problem. And so what you can do to find out which one in the back has a problem is you can put it up in the air safely like I've got it here, and then you take your wheel and you spin this thing. By the way, doesn't this remind you of The Price is Right? You got the giant wheel and you're spinning it. But when you spin your wheel, you're trying to listen to the wheel bearing, which is here in the middle. And what you're listening for is like a low rumble or a crunchy sound or something like that. And this one definitely has that. I can hear that. Let me see if I can pick that up with this extra. Now, there's two different noises here. there's a little bit of the pad rubbing on the rotor, and it's kind of a swish, swish, swish sound. Ignore that sound, and let's see if we don't hear this grumbly or crunchy sound in the middle of our wheel bearing. And hopefully this is picking some of that up. Another way that you can do this, if you're having a little bit more trouble, is you can get one of these. This is a mechanic's stethoscope, and you can put this thing on and then come around here to the back with me. I want to show you back here. Give you some light on the subject. Look right up in through here. This is our wheel bearing right there. And so you can take your, let me see, get the light a little better. There we go. So right here is the back of our wheel bearing. And you can take your stethoscope and this little metal tip on it, and you can put that either in the center of the wheel bearing or on one of the bolts, and then spin the tire. And when you do that, you'll hear through the stethoscope that crunchiness or that grumbling sound. And that's how you can determine which one of the wheels is giving you that problem in the back of the vehicle. So we've determined that this wheel bearing is bad. We could hear that crunchy sound to it, and sometimes you can even feel that in the wheel, or if you touch some portion of the suspension while you're rolling that wheel around, you can feel that crunchiness just, translating through the suspension. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this wheel, and then I want to show you step by step how to get this old wheel bearing out of there the quick and easy way, and then how to put the new one in. All right, so to get to our wheel bearing, the next thing that we've got to remove after the tire is out of the way is going to be our caliper. And so the caliper is held on with two bolts right here. These are 14 millimeter bolts. And so you'll want to break those things free. And let me show you on this upper one here. When I go to turn this one, oops, slipped off. When I go to turn this bolt to get it loose, look right there. You see the backside keeps turning. And if that happens to you, and it might just do so, you're going to need to grab a 17 millimeter wrench to hold this backside. But if you notice, a normal 17 millimeter wrench is usually too fat, too wide to fit down on there. I don't know why the manufacturers always seem to do that, but you may need one of these, which is a really narrow or skinny 17 millimeter wrench to hold the backside in order to break it free and get it turning, just like that. I'll put a link in the description to these things. I'm not sponsored by them, but they do come in handy. And so let's go ahead and break this lower one free. Again, the 14 millimeter. And once it's broke free, oftentimes you can just unspin these by hand. You won't have to hold the back anymore. All right, so those are the two bolts there. And now you just take this thing, kind of wiggle it, and pull it towards the back of the vehicle, and it'll come right off. And you just want to set it here to the side, just kind of out of the way. And while I was doing that, this little spring popped out of these pads. And so let me put that back in there. But they should stay. Everything should stay right there. Now, we need to remove this bracket, and it's held on to the knuckle here by these two 17 millimeter bolts. So let's get that next. All right, so let's get these 17 millimeter bolts loose. Sometimes they're on there pretty hard. These were not too terribly stuck on. It may take some force to get these things free. And just like the other bolts here, once they're broke free, you can usually get them by hand. So I'll go ahead and twist these things out. It's a good idea to go ahead and leave the top one in and just take the lower one out first. That way it doesn't fall on your foot or something like that. There we go. Now that I've got both of these bolts out, I can just take this caliper bracket off, and I'm going to leave the pads in it and just go and set this aside for later. Now that the caliper is out of our way, next thing to come off is going to be this rotor. A lot of times the rotors are going to be seized to the hub. They get rusty in here. And so you can there's always multiple ways to do things, guys. And you can either whack on it with a hammer here in between the studs, or in the case of Toyota, they were nice enough to give us these threaded holes here. And those take a M8 by 125 bolt. And you can just screw the M8 by 125 bolts in to these threaded holes like this. And then get yourself whatever size socket fits the bolt that you've chosen. In this case, it's 13 millimeter. And you take and you just tighten up a little bit at a time each one of those bolts. And do you hear that crack? That was the rust breaking free on the back side of that rotor. And then as you tighten up each side, there it goes, really popped free that time. Just a little bit at a time each side. And eventually, just like that, it'll come loose because these bolts are poking through here and pushing against that hub surface right there to pop the corrosion free on the rotor. Now that the rotor's free, this right here, guys, is our wheel bearing. And inside of the guts of this thing, and you can kind of look on the back side over here, as I turn this, you'll see. And you'll be able to feel with your hand the crunchiness of that bearing as you turn it like this. And then let me see if I can pick it up with the audio on the second mic here. Hopefully that's picking it up, but it's kind of a crunch, crunch, crunch sound. All right, the next step in our process is we need to unplug the ABS speed sensor wire here. And if you notice, it's got this sort of clamshell of plastic around it, a little protector. The way you get this off is you take your little screwdriver and stick it here underneath this little tab and pry that open a little bit. And then also under this little tab, stick your screwdriver under there and pry it open a little bit. And then once those little latches are undone, you can come in here with your fingers and just open this up, kind of wiggle and pull it apart, and it'll trying to keep my fingers out of your way. And it'll just come right open like that. And you don't want to take it all the way off necessarily because the wires in here kind of snake around. You see the way the wires snake around inside of there? And so we don't want to have to re-snake them around the right way. So once you get this loose, you can, there's this connector underneath here. You can just take your fingers on the top and bottom and squeeze that and just pinch and squeeze and then pull backwards, and that will release that connector. Again, I'm just pushing this little tab right here in the back, which is on the bottom, and pulling it off. Now, take all of this and just set it aside out of your way so it won't get damaged. Now we're ready to remove our wheel bearing, and it's held in place by these 4 bolts. They're 14 millimeter, and also note that the ABS speed sensor wiring plugs in here at the 12 o'clock position. So whenever we go to put the new one back in, we want to make sure that that plug-in location is oriented right there. So let me get my 14 millimeter in here, and we'll break these free. There we go. And it doesn't matter the orientation or the one that you go to first and second when you're taking it off, but we'll talk about that when we go to put it back on. These things, once they break free, if you're blessed enough to be in a rust-free environment like we are here, once they break free, I can turn that by hand and unbolt that thing. But if you're in a place where there's a lot of corrosion and rust, these may be a little bit more stubborn, and you can put a little bit of lubricant on the other side. Let me show you on this side. You can see right through here, this is the bolt itself. And so you can spray a little bit of lubricant back here on these bolts, and it'll help them kind of unwind out of there if you've got some corrosion in there. So I've gone ahead and removed 3 out of the 4 of these bolts that hold in that wheel bearing. And I'm leaving this one here in just a couple of threads like that, because I'm going to bust that wheel bearing free, and I don't want it to fall out of here and hit me on the toe, especially since I'm out here like a fool in my flip-flops. And also I don't want it to damage this backing plate, because oftentimes these will come off together, and I don't want it to bend this stuff out of place. So now we're ready to get our wheel bearing out of its place here. Let me show you. Come on this side. Let me see if I can get you some light. So you can see that wheel bearing is onto the backing plate, and it's still stuck inside of the hub there. It won't just come free. We're going to have to give it some persuasion. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. They sell slide hammers, which you can attach to the front and yank and beat off this thing from the front. And then also, if you're not reusing this thing, you could even hit from the backside and pop it out with either an air hammer or something like that. This is a great time because we're fixing to get aggressive with it. We're fixing to damage this thing. We're fixing to get aggressive with it. This is a great time for us to compare the new part to the one that we're about to take off. That way, if we somehow got the wrong part, we can go and get the right part before we tear up this one and it's sitting here for the weekend. So grab your new part and you want to compare it to your old one. First thing I like to do is line up the studs. Make sure that it's the same stud spacing and all of that. The other thing I want to do is make sure it's the same diameter of where the wheel will attach to. And then also I'm orienting it such that our little ABS speed sensor wire is up and make sure that your bolts and all of the spacing of where it would mount is the same, and it is. One thing you'll notice is you can take the new one and rotate it and you won't hear or feel any crunchiness. It's nice and smooth with a little bit of resistance versus the old one, which will be crunchy and loud. So that tells you that you've got a good part. Now I'm ready to remove our wheel bearing, and it's unbolted except for a couple of threads on a bolt up here in this upper left corner in this case. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to whack it with a hammer here, and what that's going to do is it's going to pop this free from the knuckle back here, and you'll see a gap open up, hopefully. Let me see if I can get you some light somewhere. Maybe this light will stay here, maybe it'll fall down, I don't know. But we're going to whack on it right here, and this gap ought to open up right there. So let's see what happens. Okay, there we go. And if you look real close here, there's a gap opened up there between that backing plate and our wheel hub. So it's starting to come loose. We can give it a little bit more love. There we go. Now, notice it came free, but it didn't come flying off and hit me. And the reason for that is because I left this one bolt in the back here just for that one reason. So I can undo this bolt now and it will come off. We're going to have to reuse our backing plate, so you just peel this thing off of the old part. Just like this, there'll be a little bit of corrosion holding it in place, but not too bad. And if you notice, this is the direction that it goes on. The opening in it is towards the back of the vehicle in this case, because that's where the caliper was. So now that that old wheel bearing is out, you can see inside of this bore here all that rust and corrosion that was holding it in place and causing it to be difficult to get out. So you want to clean that surface up. Get yourself a wire brush or a little something on a biscuit or whatever that you can clean all of this rust out of here with. Get this nice and clean. You're doing this for your own good to get the new part to slide in better, and you're also doing it for the next guy, doing a solid for the next guy, so that if and when this has to be done again, it'll come free a whole lot easier. All right, so now that I've got all of the corrosion off of this surface, I'm going to coat it with a little bit of high temp grease, okay? Again, you're doing the next guy a favor here, because this will keep it from corroding anymore and also keep the new hub from sticking in this bore over time. There we go. And it doesn't have to be perfect, just a light coating of grease right in there. And the other thing you want to make sure of is that this surface, this mounting surface, is nice and flat. So if there's any chunky rust up in here that's going to prohibit that wheel bearing from sitting flat here, make sure you clean that surface really good. All right, so now let's go ahead and put the new parts on. So grab your backing plate, and remember it goes up here with the opening in the backing plate towards the back of the vehicle. And we're going to take our new hub, and remember its ABS speed sensor wiring needs to go up towards the top. So just take the two and put them together the way they're going to go, and then set it in place, trying to just go straight on, and you're looking through the holes to make sure that you see it lining up with the holes in the back of the hub. So look right through this little hole and you'll see right through here, maybe you can see my fingers on the other side there, that is lined up. And take one of your mounting bolts and put a little Loctite. Notice I put some blue Loctite on that. And then you take that bolt and you go through that backing plate and try to get it started by hand into the threads of the wheel bearing itself. And it may take a little bit of wiggling back and forth, but you'll feel it. It'll start to grab threads and then you won't be able to pull it out the back. Once you've got some threads grabbed on there, like I have there, grab you another one of your mounting bolts and choose a different one of the holes. And just like the first one, just go in from the back, try and start it by hand. And once you feel it grab a few threads, you'll feel that because you won't be able to bring that bolt back out like here. So that those two are started. Now we've got two more to go ahead and get started by hand. So we'll do this one just so that you guys can see that nice and easily from the back side there. There we go. See there, all the way in. And the final bolt will be down here in this lower corner. And again, right now, I'm just getting them started by hand. We're not tightening anything up with any tools. We're just making sure that we don't cross-thread any of these bolts. And if you've cleaned your threads and you've got a new part, then all of this stuff should come together just by with your fingers. There we go. Now, you can wiggle this thing back and forth a little bit and it'll close that gap. I was pushing and wiggling and it closed that gap up. Now I can go ahead and draw up my bolts. And especially if you put a little bit of the grease on there, it'll really help this stuff to slide back into place. And I'm tightening up my bolts by hand. Again, they're going all the way in because the threads on the new part are clean and the threads on those bolts are clean. There we go. So now we've got all four of our new our bolts into our new wheel bearing hub assembly here, and we're going to tighten these bolts to 66 foot-pounds. Now when you tighten these, you want to tighten in a crisscross pattern. So got that one, and now since I did that one down there, I'm going to do this one up here next. There we go. And then we'll finish with the other two. That's it. Now that the wheel bearing and hub assembly is bolted in place and torqued in place, just give it a spin, make sure it feels right, and then we're ready to put our rotor back on. So stick that in place. Now notice it's going to want to flop around, and it may be hard to put our caliper back on top of it while it's flopping around. So just take one of your lug nuts that you took off of the vehicle and just spin that on there until it's flush up against the rotor. And that'll hold the rotor in place so that it's not going to flop around while we try to put a caliper on. All right, first part of the brake caliper that we're going to put together is our brake pad and caliper bracket here. Remember, we left everything together. And so all we got to do now is just be very careful and slip the calipers and the brake pads back over the way they came off. Grab yourself one of your mounting bolts. And these need to have a little bit of Loctite on them, so I got the blue Loctite on there. Just line up your mounting bolt. You'll move it around, you'll feel it grab. Again, just by hand, just so we don't cross-thread anything. And we can do the lower one here. Again, just move it around until you feel it fall into the threads. There we go. And then these bolts, we need to torque to 79 foot-pounds. Call it 80 foot-pounds if you want. So these caliper bracket bolts get torqued to 79, or let's call it 80 foot-pounds. That one. There we go. Now that our caliper bracket's in place, we can take our caliper and we just take it just the way that we took it off, put it over the top of our pads, hold your pads close to the rotor as you can, kind of wiggle it back and forth, and it should fall back into place just like it came off, just like that. There we go. And then once it's back in place, you'll see that these bolts that come through here will line up with their those slide pins. So just kind of move it by hand until you feel it grab the threads. Get started. And it may take a little finagling, but there we go. We got it started, and it should go in nice and easy. Get the one started, go up to the top, get the other one started as well. And if it's not lining up, just kind of move it a little bit at a time until you feel it drop into the threads, just like it did there. And we'll tighten these up. These get torqued to 25 foot-pounds, which is basically just snug. But there we go. So that's there, and we'll tighten that up. Those are 14 millimeter, and we'll tighten those to 25 foot-pounds. A lot of times these will tighten up without spinning the little nut on the backside, just like this one did. But if that spins, just remember to get your thin little 17 millimeter wrench and hold the backside. A lot of times you can just hold the backside with your hand and it'll be enough. Well, in this case, the upper one wants to spin on us. So let me get my wrench. Let me go get my 17 millimeter narrow wrench, put that on there for this final tightening up here. There we go. Now that's snug, 25 foot-pounds, and we have it all back together. All right, so the last piece of this puzzle is going to be reattaching our ABS speed sensor wire. So just like we removed it, we're going to take it, and the clip on the sensor goes towards the bottom. So we'll just orient this thing to go back on to the connector. And once it lines up, it'll slide into place and then clip or click when it's all the way forward. And then you just take your clamshell, wrap it back around it, and squeeze it. And it's hard for me to see, but the little clips will come back together and lock in place. And then this thing won't come back off. There we go. Now, we have a new wheel bearing. Everything feels good, and we are ready to go. Test drive it. Well, there we go, guys. As you can see, it's not too hard to change the rear wheel bearings on these Priuses like this. Hopefully, by watching my video, you have the confidence to do it yourself at home. Thank you guys for your time today. If this helped you out in some way, do me a favor too. Hit that like, that subscribe button, and share with your friends. It helps us to reach a greater audience and help more people. Again, thank you for your time. Y'all have a wonderful day. God bless.